So, Klaus is the 2D animated film you've been waiting for, or at least the one you didn't know you were waiting for. Because you might look at how we have so much computer animation for movies now, and just remark, I remember the good old days of the Disney Renaissance when 2D animation was vibrant and expressive and had great characters and took chances and stuff like that. Where are those films? Why don't we have any of those films anymore? Well, now we do. Now we do. I mean, they've kind of been here. You go to look at the Ghibli stuff, and there's a lot of independent animated films from across the globe that do great 2D animation. And those are all really good. You should definitely seek them out. But I've never seen a 2D animation film this decade that looks this good, is this expressive, and just won me back into, it whisked me back, to like the Disney Renaissance age, where, you could have animation that was colorful and vibrant and expressive and had just this great quality to it and its own unique style. And this is it. This is what we've been waiting for. Especially great because it's directed by Sergio Pablos, who had actually worked in the Disney Renaissance era on stuff like The Hunchback of Notre Dame. So he brings a lot of that great style here. So like if you watch this film and you think, this kind of seems like a Disney production, kind of like, some of the characters kind of have that little bit of that Emperor's New Groove type style and expressiveness going to them. This is why. It's coming from a veteran Disney animator, and it is gorgeous. So we could spend a lot of time talking about the animation, but we'll talk a little about the story here as well, because we gotta. So the story is, it takes place in takes place in this small little island called Smearsburg. I think it's called Smearensburg. Close enough. Where this postman by the name of Jesper, voiced by Jason Schwartzman, has to set up a post office. Now the thing is, Jesper is the son of a wealthy postmaster general. They run this amazing, post office operation. They have this great post office academy, but Jesper just can't cut it as a postman. So his dad figures, look, unless you prove yourself, you're out on your butt. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to station you on this small little island to set up a post office, and you got to meet a certain quota. If you don't meet the quota, you're out of the family. Well, I guess he's out of the wealth. I don't know how far he is out of the family. So he comes to Smearenburg, and the town is literally at war with itself. There are feuding families. Nobody wants to talk to each other. Everyone is just angry and in a constant state of feuding, and is just constantly at war. So it's not really a great spot to make a post office. So, like, desperate to find some means of delivering letters, he happens upon this hermit called Klaus, voiced by J.K. Simmons. Now, Klaus has kind of been this hermit. He's kind of lived in this lodge for the longest time. No one's talked to him. And he has all these toys just sitting about. And so, just like trying to silently help Jesper out through like a series of errors that happen, he ends up giving one of his toys to a child. And when seeing how grateful the child is, and seeing how, a lot of the usual hatred around town isn't so much in that kid, he feels like, oh, well, why don't we do more of that? Why don't we deliver toys? And now, of course, it's Jesper who realizes, oh, we should deliver more toys, because he comes up with the great angle. If Klaus can deliver toys, then kids will send letters to Klaus, and then he can count that as postage. So he kind of gains from this. He's got to convince Klaus to do it, because he's kind of like a little bit of a silent giant who's a little bit reluctant to do it, but he eventually gets into the groove of it. And once that happens, the post office starts taking off. The Santa Claus myth starts happening because Jesper delivers all these toys in secret. And so a sort of like believable structure for how like the Santa Claus mythos happens is kind of staged around this wonderful little folklore tale. The cast here is amazing. I mean, Schwartzman is perfectly cast as sort of like a David Spade type who can ramble on a little bit and has that little air of like cockiness and meekness to him, which makes for great slapstick comedy. J.K. Simmons he's done a ton of voice work, so he's become like pretty recognizable at this point. But while watching this film, I had to question whether or not, like, when I first heard him, I thought like, okay, that kind of sounds like J.K. Simmons, but he's so gruff in this role that until he started speaking more, like, I couldn't quite tell it was him. So that was interesting. He does a great job playing this kind of like gentle giant. You have Rashida Jones playing Alva, who's a school teacher who, because everyone was feuding in the town, like she's been here before Jesper, but she couldn't make it as a school teacher, so her school's been turned into like a fish market. Now, of course, eventually once the town turns around, she'll eventually change her, her grumpy tune to like, okay, maybe I can teach kids. Because let's face it, if they want to write letters, they got to know how to write. And you can only really learn how to write if you got a teacher. And so that happens. And then there's a lot of like great supporting voice casts here. You have the two sides of the town one's ruled by a woman played by Joan Cusack. Another is played by Will Sasso. And they kind of meld into their roles as well. Like there's a few moments where I couldn't really tell if it was them or not. I could, however, tell when Norm Macdonald was playing a character. That being said, I think he's great at playing this sort of like somewhat drunken sea captain who's kind of like a little bit like little free flowing type of guy. He doesn't have much concerns in the world. I think he's perfectly cast as that. The animation here. Let's get back to the animation. The animation is gorgeous. Just the shading they use here, the colors, the great slapstick sequences they stage, and it actually gets pretty heartfelt by the end. I mean, this seems like a fairly standard type of like Christmas story of like trying to weave the Santa mythos, but I think it does it to such like a relatable degree because they don't really weave a whole lot of magic into it. I love the way they kind of slowly reveal how the history behind Klaus and Jesper's whole deal. I love how they set this up, and just the visuals. The visuals, you could just drool over. You could take any screenshot from this film and just it actually kind of reminds me of like it feels like it's borrowing from a lot of different stuff. Like I can kind of see a little bit of like Emperor's New Groove in there. It also kind of reminded me of maybe it's just kind of like the lankiness of the character, but it kind of reminded me a little bit of the Curse of Monkey Island style. But you can tell there's a lot of influence. There's a lot of great exaggeration, some great slapstick here. And so, some genuinely great performances, natural performances, which is what I kind of miss from like the Disney Renaissance era, where it feels like characters don't have to try too hard, for gags. Like there's, it's somewhat casual. Norm Macdonald, I don't think they needed any. Norm Macdonald's pretty damn casual. I don't think they needed to give him a lot of direction on that. So yeah, I guess the only thing that I'm really mad about is that this film didn't go to theaters. It was a Netflix exclusive and didn't end up in theaters, which is kind of sad because we could really use more 2D animated films like this in the theaters, to kind of like balance out with the computer animation. That being said, I don't know how well it would have done in the theaters. It might have been overlooked, and studios might have said, well, we can't do 2D animation anymore because people don't go to it, which is really a shame. So if you're cruising through Netflix and you're trying to find like a good Christmas film that you can watch with the family, Klaus is really good. Like I love the humor in here. It doesn't feel too dumbed down for kids. The visuals are amazing. It's just a damn good animated film that it feels odd to say it's a throwback, but there we are. So for Klaus, 4 out of 5 stars.